Welcome Knights to the Relic Knights tutorial. Relic Knights is a tabletop war game that uses cards instead of dice to determine the actions of the game. In this demonstration, I'll be using the Cersei Speed Circuit starter set as well as the No Empire starter set. When you start a game, you and your opponent will determine how many points you both are bringing to the table. Since I'll be using the starter sets from both these factions, I will have the point limit set to the minimum of 35. Now, for those of you who don't know how to exactly build a squad or a cadre, as it's known in this game, you do so by adding up the point values listed on the cards. It's as simple as that. There aren't many options left for you to choose. However, you'll notice that when combining the point values of the units on the Cersei Speed Circuit side, it equals up to 27 points, while the No Empire equals up to 30 points. You can supplement the rest of the points by purchasing something that are called boosts. Boosts are benefits that you can take in with your cadre, and they can provide buffs to you onto the battlefield. So even if you had a good selection of units to pick from, you might want to include a few boosts in your cadre because they're very helpful and they're not that expensive. So they can help fill the gaps in some of your cadre lists. So, assuming that both players have 35 points in this example, that'll also determine the size of the board we'll be playing on, how many knights we're allowed to bring into the game, and how many victory points we are trying to accomplish. It also determines how big our ready queue is, which I'll describe in detail later. Because Relic Knights is a war game, it's going to have a lot of specific rules pertaining to each individual model, but this tutorial will just be about the general overview and a bunch of need to know rules about the game and generally how it plays so that you can get a better impression of what to expect. So, once you and your opponent have gathered your armies and set the table, you will both take your Esper decks. These are a standard deck of 42 cards that have what are known as the Esper symbols on them. They'll have two symbols, a primary and a secondary symbol. And they'll have different factions and such and so forth. And there are two special cards in here known as the Void and the Wild. We'll go into detail on how these work later on in the video. First, we'll be talking about the setup. So when you set up the game, you need to determine who is the hero and who is the villain. The hero gets to deploy second but starts the first turn, where the villain deploys first but is second to go. To determine who is the hero and who is the villain, both players will take their decks and reveal the top 3 cards. Now, this side is the Cersei Speed Circuit, and this side is the No Empire. Cersei Speed Circuit's faction is creation, so they support the green, while the No Empire supports entropy, which is red. So when you reveal these top 3 cards, you would check which one match your faction color. So in this example here, the Cersei Speed Circuit has 2 symbols here. The higher or the primary symbol at the top is worth 2, while the lower or secondary is worth 1. And these wilds are worth 1 of everything, but in this case we only want it for the green. So here the Cersei Speed Circuit has a value of 3 for their color, while the No Empire has a value of 0. And it's then at this point where this player gets to determine whether or not they want to be the hero or the villain. As I mentioned, the hero deploys second but goes first, and the villain deploys first but goes second. They will decide that they want to be the hero. They want to go first. So we'll set aside their deck because it won't be used for the remainder of the setup. The villain will then shuffle their deck and reveal 2 cards. The first card will be their victory conditions, and the second card will be the hero's victory conditions. So when you get a starter set of Relic Knights, it'll come with a lot of reference cards. Some of those are the scenario cards. So here, the villain had just revealed essence and creation, a primary essence and a secondary creation. So what that means is that we'll take those 2 scenario cards. The primary represents their primary victory condition, and the secondary color represents their secondary victory condition. These are now 2 victory conditions that the No Empire must complete in order to achieve victory points. Relic Knights isn't about destroying your opponent's forces. It's about who can get the required victory points faster than their opponent. It doesn't matter if you only have 1 unit left standing. If you have the victory points to win, you've done it. In addition to the primary and the secondary victory conditions that you get, you will always have access to your faction's specific victory condition. In this case, the No Empire has the faction condition of Slave Raid. So, the No Empire player can take these reference cards and put them within easy distance of them for visual reference. And for the hero player, they will have a law primary condition or primary scenario and a corruption secondary. So they'll take those reference cards. If, when revealing victory conditions in this manner, you reveal a void or a wild prismatic, that then makes it so that both players have whichever symbol you revealed. If you revealed void, then both players will get calamity. If you revealed prismatic, then both players will have crystal harvest, in addition to anything else. So for example, if you were flipping the cards and you revealed prismatic, now both players have that, and you would reveal again until you got your 2 specific primary and secondary. Void, so now both players will have void. And then again, now the villain has primary, secondary, and these, and their faction. And the hero, primary, secondary, and these, and their faction. Once you've determined your scenario conditions, you're ready to create your battlefield. Because this is a 35-point game, the board will be 3 by 3 feet, and that's where we will deploy our terrain. So here I've marked off my 3 by 3 board that I'm going to be playing with, and I've already set up terrain. If you're curious, this terrain is something that I've made myself using simple styrofoam. You can see the blue styrofoam there that's unpainted. I simply carve it up, paint it up, and put flock on it. So here is our battlefield. Now, unlike other war games, there are no specific player edges. The entire battlefield is where you can deploy. But now we're getting into deployment. So if you recall, the No Empire, or the red faction, was the villain, which means that they will deploy first. The way that you deploy is in stages, alternating. First, both players will deploy their objectives, then both players will deploy any boosts that they have, and lastly, they will deploy any units that they have. Now here's where the strategy comes into play. Each player will have 3 objective tokens, 2 secondary objective tokens, and 1 primary. You can place these anywhere on the field. However, they cannot be placed within 9 inches of another objective. So depending on you and your opponent's objectives, you might want to keep your objective away from them, or keep it close by, or it's a central location where it's harder for them to get to. You'd have to look at your objective specifically to determine what's really the best placement for them. But it's also helpful in board control, because again, where you place it, your opponent cannot place their objective, and once it comes time to place units, your opponent can also not place their units within 9 inches of an objective token. So let's fast forward this a bit. Each player will place one of their objective tokens, and then they'll take turns. You can pick whichever objective token you want to place first, and afterwards. As long as you follow the rules that they cannot be within 9 of an enemy objective, or one of your own. Once both players have deployed their objectives, they then take alternating turns again, deploying their boosts, with the villain always deploying first. Remember, boosts are extra buffs that you can put into your cadre list to help supplement some of the point values. So you could, or you might not have any boosts. Although, an important thing to note when adding boosts into your list: you cannot have more than 2 boosts of the same kind. And it's also helpful to note that if you have, for example, 2 of the same kind of boost, their effects do not stack if you happen to place them right next to each other. So that's just something to keep aware of. In this example here, the no player has 3 boosts that they will use representing these tokens. If you get a starter set, it comes with a bunch of tokens numbered 1 through 8. And the way that you can keep track of that is with a nice little reference card here, which is in a sleeve and that I've marked with an expo marker, so that this can easily come right off for future games. You also have a reference card to list which boost you have brought. So anyways, back to deployment. You will take turns deploying your boosts anywhere onto the map. However, boosts can be placed anywhere. They can be placed right next to your opponent's objectives, right next to yours, right next to each other. There are no limitations. You simply pick whichever boost you want to place and place it down. And then you alternate placing boosts. Once both players have finished placing their boosts, you then deploy units. Again, always starting with the villain. And they can pick any of their units to place first. And a unit is any number of models represented by a single card. So some units have multiple models to that card. You will be placing all of them at the same time. However, in the example of Questing Knights and Relic Knights, they come with a cipher, which is a smaller monster that gets to do fancy things and can't be destroyed. However, they're represented by a separate card. So a knight and their cipher are separate units, and therefore can be deployed separately. So back into the strategy of board control. You can place your units anywhere that is not within 9 inches of an enemy objective, or 9 inches of another enemy unit. So depending on where you place yourself can change how your opponent deploys their units. Otherwise, you simply alternate once again, placing units that are represented with multiple models within what's known as cohesion. With units that have multiple models on their card, they must always maintain cohesion, which means that they must be within 3 inches of each other. If they are ever not within 3 inches of each other, they must spend any and all movement to get within 3 inches of each other before they can function as a normal squad again. It's also worth noting, as I mentioned, that because there are no specific deployment edges or sides of the field You can place your units wherever you like. They can be scattered all across the map, in and around, and by each other. Once you have deployed all your units, it is then time to set the ready queue. And for that, I'll be showing you what the dashboard looks like. So this is what a Relic Knights dashboard looks like. Here I have my Esper deck, my unit cards and their references, a reference card from my specific questing knight, my scenarios, and all this other stuff set to the side. So what I mean by setting your ready queue is you take all of your units that you've brought and you would place them in a queue, which means you'd put them in the order that you wish to activate them. Now, because this is a 35-point game, I'm only allowed to have 2 queue slots. Larger games will give you access to more queue slots, from 3 to 4 to 5. The rest of the cards that you do not use will go into your idle pile. Once you set your queue, you will draw the top 5 cards from your deck into your hand. And it is at this point that you may take a mulligan. To take a mulligan, you simply look at your cards and determine which ones you want to get rid of. If I'm playing here as a Cersei Speed Circuit faction, I don't want any of these. I want symbols representing my faction, and none of these do that. So I'm going to discard all of these cards, put them into the pile right below my Esper deck, known as the discard pile, and draw back up to 5. And now this is more of a hand that I can work with. Once you've done that, you're ready to play the game.